So I had originally thought that I was going to do a Facebook live stream. I was just telling Father James I'm not savvy enough to know that I could turn my camera sideways and that you wouldn't see us in some crooked fashion. So instead, this is a recording that you're seeing, after the fact. So thank you for joining with us. I'm Will. You know me, y'all who are watching this. This is Father James Blomeley, whom I've gotten to know a little bit in the last couple of years. Yeah. Maybe more so in the pandemic than even before that. Yeah. So perhaps there's a strange blessing in the midst of that.
Yes. Well, there have been, and that's one of them. It really is. It really is.
So today is a treat for me. And I don't intend, you and I talked for this to be a tightly scripted dialogue, but this is a treat for me. In the first case, this is my first time being in the sanctuary for St. Nicholas. Yeah. And if you're watching First Methodist folks, St. Nicholas, many of you probably know, is right around the corner from us, our neighbors here right downtown. Yeah. And this past summer, our intern, Noah, came and joined with you in worship pretty regularly.
For Vespers, he sure did. He sure did.
Which is every Saturday.
Every Saturday evening.
6 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was excited to talk with you because today is the feast day of St. Nicholas.
It is.
There's lots of conversation in the air all the time about Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And as soon as I learned even just the smallest amount about who St. Nicholas was, I thought, man, that is rich and wonderful. And I've always thought, I wonder if somebody could tell me more about who St. Nicholas is. But before getting to St. Nicholas, I wonder if you could say a little bit about who you are and how St. Nicholas Orthodox Church came to this place.
Well, I'm Father James Blomeley. At one time I was Methodist, and I look back at that fondly. It was a wonderful time. But I became interested in Orthodoxy. My family and I became Orthodox. And eventually, I've always had kind of a bent, so I ended up going to a diaconal program at our seminary up in Pennsylvania. And as a part of that, I just became very involved. And so when we got to 2008, which is kind of when this story starts, I got a phone call one day. At the time, I was the deacon in our parish in North Atlanta in Woodstock. And I got a phone call at the place where I work. Somebody called and said, I understand that James likes icons. And so I said, well, yeah, I do. And he said, well, I have one if you'd like to see it. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So he brought in the icon. And it was an icon that I could not identify. I just could not really tell. But his story was really interesting. After World War II, he had gone into the petroleum business, and they'd send him all over the world. And at one point he was in, I guess it was probably Yugoslavia, maybe what is now Serbia, and he ran across an icon, which is in back of us, and he just liked it, and he bought it. He didn't know what to do with it, so he took it home and put it in the closet. And then every time that he was transferred a lot to like the Middle East or to Asia or wherever, every time he went somewhere, he took the icon, put it in the closet. And finally, he and his wife retired, and they came to Murphy. Again, the icon was in the closet, and he saw it one day, and he thought something like, well, I guess I should do something with this. Maybe somebody would be interested in buying it. And so I did. I bought it, and then I had called a friend and that knows a lot about icons and asked him what it was, and he told me the story of the icon. And it's what's called a St. Nicholas mosaic. It's an icon of St. Nicholas in a particular setting, having to do with a Russian city in about 1400 or so, something like that. So I did buy it, and I kept it in the office where I worked, and I kept looking at it. See, I'd always had this notion it'd be great if there was an Orthodox church here, but I knew that was really crazy. It was just crazy talk. But I kept looking at this icon and thinking about him going in and out of closets. I thought, if he can come out of the closet, maybe we can too. Now, at the time, as far as we knew, we were the only Orthodox family here. We later found out about one other person, a woman that chased my daughter into the dance school, the Janus Alice dance school, because my daughter had a bumper sticker on her car about Orthodoxy, and the woman chases her in and goes, "Is there a church? I yearn to have communion." But And so my daughter told us about that, but didn't bother to ask this woman her name. So I decided, okay, I'm going to ask, and the first time somebody says no to me, I'm just going to forget about it. So I was serving under a priest in Atlanta. I went and talked to him, and he goes, that's an interesting idea. Go talk to Father Michael in New Jersey. He was our dean. And so I called Father Michael and talked to him. He goes, that's an interesting idea. He says, you need to talk to Metropolitan Nicholas. Now, that was our bishop, and he's passed away now, but I'll tell you, he was a grandfather to me. I just loved that man. I mean, more than I can say. But every year, he had a retreat in December for deacons and servers, subdeacons and altar servers at the cathedral in Pennsylvania. And everybody liked to go to it. So Father Michael said, well, you can talk to him there. And so I went up to Pennsylvania, and it was the Vespers for St. Nicholas that night. And in fact, it was, without getting too much detail, it's old calendar. They're on the old calendar. We're on the new calendar here. But so this was like actually December 18 because it's 13 days behind. So after Vespers, the chancellor comes out and he sees me and he says, the Metropolitan will see you now. So I go into the altar. The Metropolitan is in his place behind the altar at the high place. And I sit down next to him and he looks at me. He goes, I hear you want to open a mission. And I said, yes. And he said, how many Orthodox are there? I said, one. And I thought he was going to throw me out. I just thought he would. I mean, I just thought this is crazy. He's going to get rid of me right now. But instead, he just kind of looked up, and his lips were moving. I guess he was praying silently, and he did that for 3 or 4 minutes, which is a really long time when you're waiting for somebody to say something. Yeah. And then he turns to me. He says, go and open the mission. And so we did. And so that was at Christmas in 2008. I was ordained in May of the next year, and then we opened St. Nicholas in August of 2009. So we've been here for a while. And it's kind of funny, the night before we opened, my roommate from seminary, Father Michael Rustic, came down from New Jersey. He was going to help out, right? Mm-hmm. So we served Vespers, just the two of us. And afterwards, we kind of sit down, and we're looking at this place. It was in a storefront out near the hospital, and we're just sitting there. And then finally, he goes, "You're not going to make it." And he goes, "No, wait a minute. I said that first." I turned to him. I said, "Father Michael, we're not going to make it. We're going to be closed within 6 months. We're not going to do anything." He goes, "No, it's going to be great. It's going to be great." And then he sits there we sit there a while longer, and then he turns to me and he goes, "Yeah, you're not going to make it." but we've done all right. We're here.
Yeah, stories that have crazy beginnings, where somebody periodically says, "There's no way this is going to happen."
Yeah.
That just seems to be like the story of Scripture in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah.
An angel comes to Mary or to Zechariah and Elizabeth, and the answer is, there's no way this is going to fly.
Yeah.
And then, lo and behold, that's just how
all the time
God
that
works.
Happens. It
right?
does. It is. It's just amazing.
That is amazing. So the church, and you mentioned the icon, which in some ways I think was the inspiration for the name of the mission. I like to think this is the mission.
Yeah.
So will you help us a little bit with who is St. Nicholas? And if you're looking at the camera, I think behind, so this is St. Nicholas as well, behind Father James on the
iconostas,
iconostas.
Right back there. Yeah, the large version.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who is this guy? Who is St. Nicholas?
Well, St. Nicholas was a real person. Sometimes people say no, but here's what we do know. We know that he was born in a town called Patera, which is now in Turkey. At the time it was Asia Minor, it was Greek. It was part of the Roman Empire. And probably around the year 260 to 270. We don't know exactly when he was born, but in that neighborhood. He grew up, and as a young man, what we're told or what we understand is that he was very devout, and that he eventually became a priest. His parents, I think he was the only child. His parents were pretty wealthy, and when they passed away, they left what they had to him. But he wasn't much interested in that. He was an ascetic. He lived very, very simply. He fasted fairly often. He spent a lot of time in prayer, and by this time he was a priest in a church in a town called Myra. Well, but he had this money, and one thing that I think this influenced him a great deal was, the gospel teaching about don't do your good deeds in front of men, so that men will give you the glory. Mm-hmm. Instead, do them in secret, and the Lord will reward you. And this is something we see over and over again in the life of St. Nicholas. Maybe the most famous story about him has to do with the 3 young women. There were 3 young women, and their father, as we understand it, was heavily in debt. At the time, in order for a woman to be able to find a husband, the woman's family had to have a dowry, something to give to the husband. And this father was just in no way could he do that. He didn't have anything. And this really, really bothered St. Nicholas. And so the story is that he took some of his parents' gold, put it in 3 little bags, and then dropped it in the window. And dropping it in the window, it just happened to fall into the shoes of the young women. And this allowed the young women to be married and to have a family and to live a life. And it also kind of explains the European custom, I think, of leaving your shoes out, and then St. Nicholas is supposed to put candy or whatever in there.
Oh, so I didn't know that tradition. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he did a lot of stuff like that. He was helping people, and if you read the stories and up through the 20th century, and probably some I don't know of more recently, he's always helping people. But it was kind of a hard life. Part of the time that he lived was during the reign of Diocletian, who was like the last Roman emperor to really persecute Christians before Constantine came around and made everything okay as far as legalizing it. Mm-hmm. So Diocletian was on his rampage, and we know that St. Nicholas spent at least 2 years in prison for his faith. And recently I read something that some scientists had gone and examined his relics. His relics are now in Italy in a place called Bari. But when they examined, they could see the damage that was done during that imprisonment, that he has back injuries and fractures that are consistent with being beaten really badly.
That's amazing.
So he was in there for about 2 years and then got out. But the stories that we hear about him are just astonishing. He is credited with sailors seek his intervention. He's credited with calming seas when ships are threatened with being sunk. He is he just has this really wild resume, and is so much so that, of course, his veneration has just been consistent all through ever since then. One thing that he did do, before I kind of move on to that, is that the First Ecumenical Council was in the year 325, and that was it was the first time the church had sent everybody together, and the reason they did it, the emperor wanted them to do it, was because there was a priest from Alexandria called Arius. And Arius taught that Jesus was not God. He was just a really special person, right?
There once was a time when the Son was not.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. And so, and that's still around, to a lot of people. But at the council, the reason they wanted the council was because this was tearing people up. There's no TV, so theology was fair game. People go to the markets and get into big arguments and stuff about what this was.
This was before people in church argued about carpet color and that kind of thing. They argued about
that was later.
The substance of Jesus' humanity and divinity.
Yeah, okay. That's right. So at the First Ecumenical Council, the story is that Arius, Nicholas finds Arius and is listening to him say, what he's teaching and why he does this, and Nicholas loses his temper and hauls off and slaps him. So they kick him out because bishops aren't supposed to be doing this. I mean, that's not right. But they bring him back in the next day. But there's all these human touches to him that he's moved by people's poverty, by the things that they're in their life that are holding them back, and then he still has time to go after a heretic every now and again.
Sure, decking the halls, decking
Arius,
decking Arius. Maybe that's where that comes from. I remember reading part of that story too. Was they said, look, whether you're right or wrong, Nicholas, you just can't haul off and deck somebody like that. That's not becoming a bishop. And so he was in jail.
Yeah.
But then while he was in jail, think it was that he had a vision maybe of Mary
and
of
Christ himself.
Christ.
Yeah.
And they had stripped him of his
Vestments.
But when they came back the next morning and found him, he had been reinvested.
Yeah.
He was dressed as a bishop, and they said, well.
And I think really a lot of people also say that certain other of the bishops had visits that evening, and were told to do that. I mean, that doesn't make, bishops still aren't supposed to hit anybody.
Don't hit people who disagree with you about
or the district
Jesus.
superintendent.
Yes,
don't be hitting them. No.
Don't do that. Yeah, we don't look fondly on that.
Yeah.
Those are some great stories. So you were telling me a story when I got here, when you were pointing to the icon that the person found that had this picture of St. Nicholas, and a story of there would be, after he had died, is this right? So can you tell that story?
Yeah. He actually died in the year 330 on December 6th. That's why we remember him on this day. And but this particular story, I think I said that the title or the way this icon is known of is St. Nicholas of Mozaisk. Mozaisk it's still a city, I think it's still there, but it was a town about 50 miles outside of Moscow, and they were under siege. This was in the 1400s, if I remember right. They were under siege by a Tatar army, which was, all of Russia actually was under Muslim domination for a couple of centuries before they got things changed. And as a result of this, for Mozaisk, this army had been outside the wall besieging the city, and they knew it'd gone on long enough that they knew they were reaching the end, that their food was running out, whatever it was. And so finally on one night they go to bed. I guess they leave a few guards, but they go to bed and they're thinking, tomorrow's the end. Tomorrow is the last day. The walls are going to fall, and we're just done for. Well, they wake up the next morning and they go to the wall expecting to see the army, and they're gone. The whole army has disappeared. And so they finally find one or two of these soldiers and they say, what happened? Why did you guys leave? I mean, why did you run away? And the story that these soldiers told was this, that during the night, that they saw a man with a sword standing not on the wall, but over the wall of the city, kind of in the middle of thin air, and was telling them they needed to leave, or terrible, terrible things were going to happen to them. And that would kind of terrify you. So they were terrified and they took off. And that was really it. And so that explains why I had trouble understanding this icon, because he does have a sword in this icon, which is not common in his depictions. But yeah, so he is, and it's just a million different ways that he's venerated. And even to the present day, back in 2017, his relics were sent to Russia for a visit, so that people could venerate his relics. And he went to several cities, I think. But over the course of his visit in Russia, 3 million people went to see him and to venerate him. And a lot of those had to wait at least 20 hours before they could get in.
Wow.
It's astonishing the amount of love that's still out there for St. Nicholas.
Absolutely. What maybe are some of the lessons or the examples that we might still learn from St. Nicholas? The lessons or habits or characteristics that we want to especially exemplify or be mindful of on a day like today?
I think maybe the most important one, and there's several, but the one I always think of is this, and it goes back to, if you will, to the story about the young ladies. For St. Nicholas, the needs and the suffering of other people was always something he responded to. And not just in the sense, and I'm sure he did, provide food or whatever if people were hungry, but in the sense of trying to change their life, to improve their life so that they could then live full and happy lives. And the young ladies are the best example of that. But really, so much of what he did, and of course he didn't want to be identified. He didn't want people to know he was doing this, and so he would do it. And then I'm sure his gratification came just from seeing the weddings or whatever the case may be.
So maybe like a fitting way to really celebrate Saint Nicholas, or to think about him, would be looking for ways that our actions or our gifts might tend toward greater freedom for like young girls in our midst, many of whom in parts of the world still are really vulnerable to people who are in power around them, usually men in their communities who do not have similar rights and that kind of thing, and finding ways to be advocates for girls.
Yeah. Or anybody, and not in a political sense, but in the sense that that we want people to live fulfilling lives, and to have joy, and to have the things that people want. I think that was kind of his thing, and he was concerned about people. There's one of the stories I've heard is from the 1950s, when, and I've seen this story several times. There's a woman coming home on a bus from work one afternoon, and of course that was not a happy country then. And she realized, because of something she had seen before, that one of the other passengers that had gotten on the bus when she got on the bus was a member of the secret police. And this is when they were still sending people off to the Gulag. Then she saw another man, an older man with a beard, sitting on the bus. And as she got out, the older man managed to get in the way of this agent, so that she was able to get out and go away without him following her. And then when she got home, she had an icon of St. Nicholas, and she looked at the icon and she thought about the old man, and she said, This is who was on the bus in Moscow in 1950 something.
Wow.
So yeah, in a lot of different ways. I think he just wants people. He wants people to lead godly lives, to lead peaceful and joyous and fruitful lives.
So the story about the young girls and the bags of gold going through the window, maybe that triggers in people's minds images of a jolly old elf who might descend down a chimney with a bag full of, maybe not gold, but teddy bears and skateboards and Nerf guns and things like that. Can you say real quickly maybe how you think about, or how that connection between St. Nicholas and traditions of Santa Claus? That's a very big question, so I don't know what the...
Well, and I'll tell you what I understand. I think that in Europe originally, their celebration was closer to this coins in the shoe kind of thing, and that was pretty normal. I think, from what I understand, and I'm no expert, I think Santa Claus was as much he is Saint Nicholas in a way, but he also was really developed in and primarily, what was that poem that somebody wrote? There rose such a clatter that thing.
Yeah, that one.
That's
Night Before Christmas.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's kind of the Santa Claus morph there, where all that comes out. I think for most of time until the 19th, 20th century, I think that's when Santa Claus as we know Santa Claus really kind of developed.
Okay, but if we kind of do some architectural or some archaeological work underneath Santa Claus, we'll find some of these maybe stories of Saint Nicholas.
I think so. It's clear that Santa Claus is just kind of a latest version, if you will. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to make a conjecture then. I have another question after this one that's not a St. Nicholas question.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you to conjecture, how might St. Nicholas encourage us in our celebrations of Christmas? Like, what would be, St. Nicholas was to come and say, here's what a Christmas celebration might look like, given that he was willing to cross the room and smack someone who said, do think about it. Like, what would you say is, here's a good way to celebrate the coming of our Savior and our anticipation of him coming again? What would he say, you think?
I think that he would say, we know how the church then approached Christmas and how they celebrated it, and it's pretty similar to how we do it now. I think first of all he would want people to be in church for the day. I mean for the holiday, however that is, whether it's Christmas Eve or Christmas or whatever, and to recognize that it is that the gifts are good and they're symbolic, but that they're really secondary to really acknowledging the nativity and the coming of God. It's really astonishing. We talk about around here. We talk about both during this and during the Theophany. We celebrate his baptism on January 6th. Is the extreme humility of Christ, that he would come and be born and be helpless and be under the care of somebody else, and as such an innocent. And then later on at Theophany, at the baptism, that he, of all people, doesn't need baptism, yet he still submits to this. And so I think that's something that I think that he would have seen, and I think that in the humility of St. Nicholas, we're seeing modeled, if you will, his take on the humility of Christ himself.
Yeah, I like that. We need to invite St. Nicholas as a guest at the table this time of year.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'll ask one more question, because we're surrounded by these things that maybe are unfamiliar to United Methodists.
Yeah.
And those are icons. And so we've talked about the icon of St. Nicholas, and there are many more here in the sanctuary. And I've gotten to walk around and look at several of them. And I wonder if you might say a couple of words about the role of icons and iconography in our spiritual life, and maybe not just our spiritual life, but more fully our life of faithfulness. So not just piety and devotion.
Well, and I think icons are something that people struggle with. If they come into Orthodoxy, when people come here, it takes a while for people to get used to the idea, because they see us kissing icons, they see us venerating icons, and they're going, that's like idol worship. That's no good. But we think of it this way. I mean, first of all, an icon is a representation of somebody who could be Christ himself, but somebody that has lived a true life in Christ. That we can look at this person and say, this is what it looks like to truly follow Christ in whatever way. I mean, there's so many different stories, but we can learn that by looking at it. And then they also become models of a sort. And this, I think, and you really kind of get this notion, this understanding of who they were, and because we believe that the saints and that people, when they go to heaven, can intercede for us, then we ask for prayers. We say, pray for me. And we have this phrase that the saints are bold before the throne of God, because they have lived this life, and so they will raise people up to God. And so in the end, there's this real there's really genuine love for the person that's being depicted, and that's why we kiss it. It's kind of like, sometimes you see little kids and they're shown a picture of their grandparents, and they just start kissing the grandparents.
That's what I was thinking as you were saying that, is pictures that we have in our home of family members that we just
and they love that.
We cherish.
Yeah. So these are family members, if you will, that have gone before us, lived through really difficult times, have faced problems, have faced crises, and come out the other side just in a wonderful way. And so it's like when Paul says this great cloud of witnesses.
Right.
Well, this is the cloud, kind of.
This is the cloud of witnesses.
Yeah.
That's right. I recently have come to think about icons and the folks that they are depicting as the original influencers. We think about social media influencers, people who are sharing images of themselves and how they're living their lives in a way of trying to influence folks. Well, back before Instagram was a thing, and even today, we have these icons depicting the lives of the saints and of Christ himself, who we hope will be the ones who have the most important influence on our lives and who we are.
Yeah, Yeah. And you know, it's a funny thing. It really cuts in both ways. A lot of saints, I mean, for any saint, there has to be a synod or a council or something where they say, yes, this guy is a saint. But a lot of saints arrive at that point kind of from the bottom up, in the sense that it's the people that are going, you know, that person. It's like my baptismal saint is Seraphim Sarov, a Russian saint. And I have an icon of him that was done before he was canonized. It was in the 1800s. And because it was done before he was canonized, there's no halo. No, that shows he's not official yet. But you see that with saints. People are going, this person is really meaningful to me. Yeah. And this person's life really influenced me and for the good. And so it's just kind of this ongoing process.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for
taking
coming.
time. I really appreciate it to
Sure.
let me come and be with you for a little bit and for talking to us about who St. Nicholas is. And anytime I think of him and hearing more stories that I knew before today, I'm encouraged and inspired by him and his faithfulness, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
Well,
and
thank you.
I'm glad to get to be neighbors with you and co-laborers in the vineyard.
Oh, and I'll tell you, I have to tell you guys, if you are at the Methodist Church, I'm really impressed by this guy. He is a pastor. There's no getting around that.
Thank you.
Sure.
And God bless you all. See you Sunday or maybe Saturday night here at 6 o'clock. Peace.